There, if you ever feel like your brain just isn't working the way it used to, maybe you are experiencing like forgetfulness or brain fog or brain fatigue, that feeling where the brain just kind of shuts off and you don't have the energy to think anymore. Or you might have experienced things like anxiety or depression or irritability. All of these can be signs of brain inflammation. And as I talked about in another video, it can sound really scary to think you might have something like brain inflammation, but hang with me because there is something you can do about brain inflammation. And that's what I want to talk about today in our video. And this is a topic that's really near and dear to me, not just because I help my clients from a trauma-informed functional nutrition herbal medicine framework to address low mood issues and other fallout from brain inflammation. But I've experienced this myself. I was dealing with anxiety and depression years ago, had an autoimmune condition, and really struggled with my health. And I knew I needed to do something to get my brain and my body back on track. And what I'm going to talk about today is something that I had to address in my own journey in getting my brain health and my energy back. And it is the really foundation of what I help my clients do as well. And it's also the framework I use when I teach other holistic practitioners and aspiring herbalists how to use herbal medicine to help their clients move forward inside of my Botanical Medicine Mastery Program so they can help their own clients move forward too. And so this is all a really important core piece of helping yourself or your clients if you work with other people to help them on their healing journey. And so brain inflammation and supporting the brain, I think, is super important and really foundational for all of us because just think about how it impacts everything in your life, your relationships, your ability to get your work done and stay focused and energized, do the things you love, show up in your life fully, get good sleep, right? Everything can be impacted by our brain health, and brain inflammation can be a big piece of all of these symptoms that we've been talking about. And it can be triggered by a lot of things as well, from everything from stress to a trauma, maybe a car accident, for example, toxins, infections. But for most people, blood sugar imbalances are really the top driver for brain inflammation. And just to kind of illustrate that fact, you may have heard that Alzheimer's disease, it is now being called type 3 diabetes just because of this relationship between blood sugar dysregulation, which is just broadly known as dysglycemia, and brain health. So we know that keeping blood sugar balanced is really vital to keeping the brain healthy throughout our lifespan. And this is really important, again, because this can kind of sneak up on you. Now, here's what happens when our blood sugar is not well regulated. So we eat some carbohydrates or sugar, and our blood sugar spikes up and then it crashes. And when that happens over and over, the body can stop responding to a hormone called insulin. And we've developed something called insulin resistance, where our body just can't get that glucose or sugar in the bloodstream into our cells and use it for energy because the cells aren't responding to insulin anymore. That means that that sugar or glucose stays in our bloodstream, creating an inflammatory situation for really every part of the body. But again, your brain is especially sensitive to this. And so insulin resistance is far more common than many people realize. And it can start early, years and even decades before people are fully aware that they are not utilizing glucose in the bloodstream efficiently. And it is creating a lot of inflammation and havoc on the brain or on the brain and the body. And so when we think about insulin resistance, there's actually some signs or clues that this is going on. And I always assess this in my clients. I want to know things like, are they getting shaky or irritable or kind of hangry if they don't, eat at a regular timetable. Maybe they go too long between meals, they start to get that fatigue and shakiness. Or maybe they are noticing things like getting really tired after a meal, which is really more specifically a sign of insulin resistance. Now, of course, there are some labs that can be done as well, looking at things like fasting insulin and fasting glucose, and even an HbA1c. And those can be really valuable, but don't be fooled because those, when you get labs done, are just a snapshot in time of what your blood sugar is doing in that moment. Now, HbA1c or hemoglobin A1c does give us a little bit more of a long-term picture of how well our body is utilizing glucose. But uh, there are some other signs that to me definitely point to insulin resistance in the body. And this is something I actually teach my students in my Botanical Medicine Mastery Program, something we call just reading the body and learning how to understand that the body is always giving us information about what is out of balance. When you know how to read the signals the body's giving you, you can actually know what's going on and where to start to get your health back on track. And so when I think about signs of insulin resistance, obviously weight gain can be a big one. Again, as we're not responding to insulin, our body can't get that sugar, that glucose into the cells so we can burn it efficiently for energy. And it starts to store that excess glucose as fat in the body. And especially that weight gain around the middle or belly fat is a really classic sign of insulin resistance. I mentioned fatigue after meals, but another sign can be skin tags, right? Those little flaps of skin that can develop sometimes around like the underarm area or the groin or the back of the neck. That is also actually a classic sign of insulin resistance as well. So again, the body starts to give us information about what is out of balance. When we start to tune in and listen to those signals, we know where to start to get our energy and our health and our brain back on track. So let's talk about if you are noticing these signs of insulin resistance or any kind of dysglycemia, any signs that your body is just not turning food or carbohydrates into energy efficiently. You really want to pay attention to that because, again, this can start years or even decades before we have a full-blown issues like diabetes or Alzheimer's disease. There's so much we can do before we get to that point if we know how to read the signs the body is giving us and then bring the body back into balance. And obviously, the first place to start, the most kind of common or obvious place would be the diet, right? Now, working on eating more protein and healthy fats and veggies, right? Lots of fiber from veggies and keeping the carbs to a minimum. Even some of those whole food carbs like potatoes or rice can be minimized for people who have signs of insulin resistance, and especially avoiding obvious processed carbs and sugar in the diet are going to help just stabilize that blood sugar roller coaster so you're not having those insulin spikes, those glucose spikes that lead to insulin resistance. But sometimes when we've had insulin resistance developing for years and years, it might take a little more than just changing the diet to really get your body back on track. And this is where I think that herbal medicine can be really a valuable player in this game. So herbs can be really powerful allies here. You can use them both as food and medicine. In fact, in the kitchen, just adding our herbs like thyme, oregano, garlic, cinnamon, ginger, these all have an anti-inflammatory effect on the body. And we talked about how insulin resistance creates a lot of inflammation. And so that is going to help, especially herbs like turmeric and cinnamon are going to help regulate your insulin response and help control your blood sugar better. But I think about using herbs as medicine here to be really impactful in getting your blood sugar back on track. Now, you may have done some research on this topic and already be aware of things like cinnamon, which we talked about, or berberine, which is a plant alkaloid that is often used to support blood sugar levels. but I want to talk about a couple of herbs that you maybe haven't ever heard of or thought about as helping to regulate your blood sugar. And these, I think, are really valuable players because they don't just work to support blood sugar, but they are what we call nutritive tonics in herbal medicine. So they provide a lot of nutritive support, help bring some energy into the body. And yet, the two herbs specifically that I want to talk about today are, they're really valuable in addressing blood sugar dysregulation and insulin resistance. And the first one is American ginseng, which is an adaptogen. If you have been hanging out with me on my channel at all, you know how much I love adaptogens because they just have this broad spectrum protection against stress. They help to regulate that HPA axis response to stress, all kinds of stress, not just what we might think of as emotional or psychological stress, but even chemical stressors or physical stressors on the body. And so, American ginseng not only is it an adaptogen, which helps to give us a little more resilience to stress, which I think all of us need, but it also helps, like all adaptogens, to regulate our mitochondrial function. And that is really our ability to make energy at the cellular level. So, this is intimately tied to our glucose response, of course, but supporting mitochondrial function in anyone who's struggling with fatigue or low mood symptoms like anxiety or depression or dealing with brain fog, I think is absolutely foundational and essential. So I love that adaptogens can help to improve mitochondrial function as well as give us a little more resilience to stress. And in this situation with American ginseng, help to improve insulin sensitivity in the body so that our cells start responding to insulin more efficiently. We start actually utilizing the energy in our body from food when we have better insulin sensitivity. So, American ginseng, maybe not when you thought about for blood sugar regulation and brain health, but in this broad sense of how it just gives the body more energy and resilience, it can be a really lovely herb. And in fact, I use this with many clients in the formulas I create to support my clients who are struggling with anxiety or depression or have had a traumatic brain injury. And we're working to support brain health as well as their resilience to stress and overwhelm. There's another herb, though, that I also have to talk about, and I believe I have a whole video on astragalus in on my channel as well because it is truly one of my favorite herbs. You know, it's funny that there's kind of this herbs kind of get there's something that comes out in like the news or the media talking about certain herbs, and all of a sudden an herb like ashwagandha or turmeric are really popular and like everybody's taking them, right? Which I think is great, and those are both great herbs. But it's funny to me in a way as an herbalist how there are actually some really amazing herbs that are out there that a lot of people just really don't know a lot about. And to me, astragalus is like this hidden gem of the herbal world. A lot of people aren't using it or know about it, but the research on astragalus, I think, is absolutely amazing. And I could go on, and I do in another video about astragalus for longevity and energy. And it is a nutritive tonic in traditional Chinese medicine. So it supports energy, it supports the immune function. And there's a lot of research actually elucidating how astragalus also helps with blood sugar regulation as well. And in fact, in TCM, in traditional Chinese medicine, this is an herb that was used traditionally to support like diabetes and other types of dysglycemia or blood sugar dysregulation because of how it works to improve our glucose response. It's also, like almost all herbs we could talk about, anti-inflammatory, going to help address that inflammation response from that side of the picture as well. And so again, I use both of these herbs in the formulas I create for my private clients to help them with not just regulating their insulin and their glucose response, but bringing more energy and resilience and nutrition into the body, supporting immune function, addressing inflammation. And it's why I love using herbal medicine as that foundation for the work that I do with my clients. And then you're going to get more bang for your buck, if you will, with your dietary changes, your lifestyle changes, doing a little more movement and exercise. Of course, really valuable in regulating your glucose response as well. So here's one of my favorite strategies. I always use adaptogens and other herbs like nutritive tonics along with dietary changes, nutrition to help regulate the HPA axis response as that foundation with every client I work with, because I know that if a client is stuck in a nervous system response of stress or overwhelm, then it is really hard to shift the body back into a state of balance. And that includes blood sugar balance. So, thinking about how we can use herbs so powerfully to shift the body back into that place of regulation, balance, where we feel good, we're burning our nutrition, our food for energy efficiently, and our energy is balanced, we're sleeping well, we're focused, our mood is stable. And again, think about how that impacts everything that's going on in your life, from relationships to the work that you do in this world to what you enjoy. So if you found this helpful, first, you might want to go watch that video on reversing brain inflammation naturally. I talk about some other herbs in there as well. If you are interested, you can also grab a free guide that I share below on how to assess your neurotransmitter function, those feel-good chemicals in the brain that are actually impacted by brain inflammation, and where to start to get your mood and energy back on track. And finally, if you're a practitioner or an aspiring herbalist, you want to go deeper into mastering botanical medicine from this functional framework, check out my Botanical Mastery Masterclass. There's a link below where you can sign up to join me. It's just a free class where I'll tell you more about how to use herbal medicine to help people heal and move forward, because so many people are looking for natural, holistic approaches to support their health that actually work and aren't just masking symptoms, and they want to get better, and you can help them do that as a practitioner. So if that's you, grab that link below and I will see you next time.